I thought. Aren't you all going to go to the Eds? Celebrate your divorce? Asked Holly Tannenbaum, poking her head into Mark Trahan's office. The beautiful blonde gasped as Mark looked up with red eyes. He pushed a thick stack of papers with his hand and tried to smile. Honestly, they just needed an excuse to get wings and beer. It's hardly worth celebrating my failure as a husband, is it? The handsome man smiled sadly. Honestly, I don't know enough details to tell if you failed as a husband or if Becky failed as a wife, Holly said, her beautiful brown eyes peering into Mark's warm brown eyes. Wow, that's the perfect HR response, he smiled. What can I say? Holly smiled tightly. I'm good at my job. You know, looking at it, Mark pushed his divorce decree again. The situation will not get better from this. Although her light brown hair was pulled back into a large bun, a small strand of blonde hair fell out in front. Holly pushed a strand of blonde hair away from her eyes. As she did so, her movement pressed her breasts against her tight blouse. She nodded in agreement. True, true. When I divorced Maddie, sitting around feeling sorry for myself didn't help me become less of a divorcee, Holly agreed. You know what? Casa O has some pretty good margaritas, and I like their steak fajitas, Mark said, standing up. Will you join? Holly was on the verge of giving up, but looked into his hopeful eyes. She raised one finger. Give me a minute, I need to make a call, she agreed and turned around. Mark picked up his vinyl briefcase and tossed a thick stack of papers that announced that he and Rebecca Trian no longer husband and wife, in a cheap suitcase. Becca Trian could return to Stepping Stone, Louisiana. Becky could go back to being Becky Wright. Becky could go anywhere, do whatever she wanted. She was no longer Mark Trahan's problem. As Mark walked out of his office, he looked at the sign pinned to the wall next to his door. Marcus S. Trahan, and under his name, a brass plaque read Marketing Manager. Marketing Manager, Mom, Mark thought. Not bad for someone fucking stupid to tie their own shoelaces either. But how is your precious Irwin doing now? A rustle of clothing told him someone was approaching, and Mark turned. His jaw hit the floor and bounced several times as Holly approached him. This time she freed her long light brown locks from her strict bun and changed out of her nondescript business suit into a fluffy, tight red blouse with straps and a knee-length black skirt. In her 5-inch heels, she was almost as tall as Mark. Ready? Holly smiled, clasping his right hand with both of hers. Look, I hope you don't mind, but I'll feel a lot safer if we go in my car, Holly admitted as they walked out of the Boyd building and into the adjacent parking lot. HM? No, that makes perfect sense, Mark agreed as she led him past his Ford F-150 pickup truck. Me? Is this yours? Mark stared at the 1965 Ford Mustang convertible. Holly agreed, opening the passenger door. Well, actually, it was my dad's car, but... And how did you manage to snatch the keys from him? Mark asked as Holly began to walk around the car. Mark walked in, reached out, and unlocked the door. It wasn't easy, Holly smiled sadly. Mark was astute enough to see that Holly didn't want to reveal how she came into possession of this classic car, so he didn't push for a conversation. She took them to a fancy Mexican restaurant, and they joined a small line waiting to be seated. Most of the visitors were like them, business people of St. Elizabeth, Paris, looking to start the weekend with spicy food and frozen alcoholic drinks. The line moved quickly, and within 10 minutes, they were seated at a table with menus in hand. Mark already knew what he wanted, but he still took a moment to see if they had added anything new to the menu. Margarita on Fridays, Mark read from the small listing leaflet on his menu. Blue, have you ever tried a blue margarita? No, and you? Holly smiled as the attractive red-headed waitress placed a basket of chips and a small cup of salsa in front of them. Mark ordered a 12-ounce blue margarita and frowned when Holly ordered mint tea without sugar. The waitress hurried away to pass on drink orders. Great, Now I'll feel like a drunk while you drink tea, Mark complained. Hey, aren't I driving? I ordered 20 ounces, Holly assured him. Maybe next time, okay? Okay, Mark smiled at the thought of next time with the blonde beauty. He nodded in satisfaction as the waitress placed the drink in front of him along with a glass of ice water. He picked up his glass and took a sip. Can I try? Holly asked after Mark had swallowed and nodded in satisfaction. Mark studied Holly's beautiful face as she took a graceful sip of his drink. As she tilted her head and pursed her lips in concentration, he admired her square face, her large brown eyes under two perfectly shaped slanting blonde eyebrows, her thin nose and full, plump lips. When she shrugged and smiled, her teeth were completely white and perfectly straight. Her face, neck, and shoulders were slightly tanned. I liked it, Holly agreed, then looked up as their waitress appeared. 3 plates of enchiladas, please. Chicken. Thank you, their red-haired waitress said. Center? Steak fajita, Mark ordered, smirking at the way the red-haired woman spoke Spanish. So, Mark, why do you say you failed as a husband? Holly asked quietly as their waitress left. Mark told Holly about meeting Becky Wright on the Louisiana State University campus, DeGard. In fact, they had little in common. She was a mediocre student and grew up the eldest of 3 daughters raised in a trailer in Stepping Stone, Louisiana. He grew up as the youngest child in a family with 3 girls and 1 older brother. The girls adored him, and his brother bullied and tortured him mercilessly. Since he could not physically resist, Mark resisted, getting only A's in school. Although Trudy, Sasha, and Helena adored him, Mark's mother liked to joke that after 3 girls and Erwin, she was too exhausted to pay any attention to Marcus. Friends and family laughed or nodded in understanding, but for Mark, being ignored or ignored by his mother was no laughing matter. Edmund, their father, was a good and loving man while he was at home. When Mark was 6 years old, his mother and father divorced, and Destrian I just stopped coming to him. And, Holly asked after a long silence. Excellent grades. Got all excellent grades, Mark confirmed. So, my roommate dragged me to this drinking party. We were there for 10 minutes, and this cute girl walked right into me, spilling my beer. Works every time, Holly giggled. Do you know how many nice guys I met this way in Connolly? Mark laughed out loud at Holly's confession. Their food arrived, and Mark told Holly about Becky's desire for a diamond engagement ring. You know, this was something she could show her mom and her sisters and all her friends at Stepping Stone, Mark said, sighing with pleasure as he tasted the juicy steak fajita. Were you at the engagement ring stage at the time? Holly asked. I think so, Mark shrugged. I mean, she was the first girl who didn't want to know everything about Erwin, didn't spend all her time staring at Erwin, watching his every move. No, Mark. Were you ready to get engaged? It's a simple yes or no question, Holly said, her eyes searching him intently. No, not really, Mark admitted. But she got the $19,000 ring. I got the degree. By that time, we had already flown out, and we lived in the Camelot apartments. Which one? Maddie and I lived in apartment 3 or 2, Holly said. No, seriously, we were at 2 or 7, overlooking the pool. Anyway, remember? Martin sent the 3 of us to this conference in Santa Rosa, said Mark. Holly agreed, scooping some beans and rice onto her fork. But this big forest fire canceled the conference, so Derek and I got on the next plane. Finnegan had family there, so he stayed, Mark continued. We're heading back. Derek gave me a ride home from Lafayette Airport. Holly watched as Mark talked about how he walked into his apartment, walked into the bedroom, and found his wife cheating, perpetrated by her wife's lovers, and how much she didn't care about their relationship. Holly remembered how Mark showed up for work a few days after the unsuccessful conference, with signs of a beating. She looked at his nose. Mark's surgeon did an excellent job repairing the damage. Is there room for dessert? We have chocolate flan that makes you forget about the world's problems, their waitress suggested. Maybe if I didn't eat all those chips, Holly smiled at the waitress. Mark paid the bill, left a generous tip, and helped Holly out of her chair. She pointed out that he had kept half of his blue margarita, and he shrugged. Oh, my ex-husband? He'd ask you what's wrong with you, Holly giggled, taking his right hand with both of hers. Oh, Becky would kill me for this, Mark agreed. Outside, a man in his 70s or early 80s offered Holly $50,000 for her Mustang. She flashed a brilliant smile and admitted that it was her father's smile. She will not part with him for any money. Pulling up next to his pickup, Holly thanked Mark for the wonderful meal. Mark was initially surprised that she knew which car was his. There were still a few cars parked in the multi-level parking lot. She kissed him. Thank you, Holly whispered. Are you kidding me? Mark chuckled. No, ma'am, thank you. She kissed him again. Hey, do you like Italian food? Have you ever been to Benito? Mark asked. Do you want to go there tomorrow evening? I can't, Holly smiled easily. Hank, I broke up my date with Hank. We got to go to the Carrie Hebert exhibit at the Lopez Center. She's an artist from Mindy, Arkansas. Anyway, we were supposed to go there tonight, but I interrupted our date to go out with you. But maybe next Friday, maybe next Saturday. Think about where the three of us can go, all together, okay? Said Holly. You, me, and Hank, okay? Yeah, Mark agreed, closing the door of his pickup truck. Hey, Mark, come on. You didn't ask her to break up her date with her boyfriend. Mark consoled himself as he got into his truck. Damn, you didn't even know she had a boyfriend. Mark continued his thoughts as he started the car. But damn, this Hank is one lucky freak, huh? Mark said, remembering Holly's kiss. Mark winced as he walked from the parking lot of his apartment complex towards his apartment. Outside, two plump women were swimming in the complex's overly chlorinated pool. Mark wondered who would have the nerve to sell plus-size bikinis. As he closed the door to his apartment, he wondered who would have the nerve to buy plus-size bikinis. Well, apparently these two did, Mark said, wincing again, and then parodied the Guns N' Roses song Paradise City. Oh, take me to Cellulite City, where the hips are wide and the girls are ugly. Opening his briefcase, Mark saw the legal documents again. He wondered what Becky was thinking when she received those papers. Then, pushing thoughts of his wife, his ex-wife, out of his mind, Mark thought again about the beautiful Holly Tannenbaum. On Monday morning, as Mark prepared a cup of green tea with a heaping tablespoon of local wild honey, several Boyd Investment Group employees watched as Holly peppered Mark with chatter about the Carrie Hebert exhibit. Powerful and provocative were the words Holly used most often. Mark noticed that Holly never used the word beautiful. Well, I suppose some of them are beautiful in their rugged simplicity, Holly said thoughtfully. With a see you later, Holly rushed out of the dining room. Several men watched her leave. Some men and some women looked at Mark questioningly. Some even looked at Mark with hostility. The HR assistant developed a reputation in the office as an ice queen. Holly built a thick and high wall around herself. Then outside of this wall, she dug a deep and wide ditch and filled it with fire-breathing dragons. Several men dared to ask a beautiful young woman out on a date, but were politely but firmly refused. Those who did not take no for an answer were no longer employed by Boyd Investment Group. At 4 o'clock, Holly looked into Mark's office. He looked up from his handwritten notes and smiled. She answered him with a warm smile. Some people ridiculed Mark for starting to write his notes by hand instead of typing them on a computer. But Mark claimed that it helped him organize his thoughts into clear, coherent ideas and plans. Do you like red beans and rice? This is Hank's cooking. Today is Monday. For some reason, Monday means red beans and rice, Holly asked. Yes, I know, Mark said. My grandmother, on the maternal side. Oh, my God. Well, do you want to come in? Holly invited. Maybe it's not as tasty as your grandmother's, but absolutely, Mark agreed, and Holly smiled happily. She gave him the address of her apartment in Lambert condominiums. Leaning over his desk, Mark tried his best, but managed to keep his eyes on her face rather than her incredible cleavage. The sparkle in her eyes let Mark know that she was stretching and posing on purpose. I think I passed this test, Mark smiled as Holly ran out of his office. You'll just love Hank, Holly assured Mark as she opened the apartment door. I know it is. About flowers? Oh, Mark, you didn't have to do that. I might like Hank. I might even want to have a few beers with Hank. But I seriously doubt I'll ever like Hank, Mark thought as he followed Holly into the apartment. She took the time to change out of her formal business suit and was now wearing a tank top and yoga pants. Mark wondered why the shirt was called a wife beater. He knew that people claimed that whenever there was a domestic disturbance on the television shows Cops or Live Police, the husband usually wore a tank top and dirty jeans. But Mark has seen just as many NASCAR t-shirts, torn flannel shirts, and torsos shirtless appearing on these shows. He followed Holly around the corner and stood in the brightly lit room, handing her a vase of flowers he had bought at the grocery store. Burns Here Burns Groceries. Look, Hank, he brought us flowers, Holly said. And some ice-cold St. Lager. Elizabeth, Mark said. Oh, look at them. They are beautiful, Mark heard an enthusiastic musical voice. Entering the kitchen, Mark saw a beautiful young woman at the stove. Her long blonde hair was streaked with brown streaks that most people called dirty blonde. She also wore yoga pants and a tank top. She appeared to be the same height as Holly and looked very similar to Holly, with slightly darker skin and a rounder face. Her eyes were a dark chocolate brown. His mother would have called them doe eyes. You said you brought beer? Hank smiled at Mark. Yes, St. Elizabeth. I hope you like it, said Mark. I know a lot of people drink. Gratchly, but I think it's pretty disgusting. Holly just couldn't keep quiet about you all weekend, Hank said as she served the food. Did she talk about me? Mark asked with genuine surprise. Yes, she was talking about you, Holly said, placing her hand on his forearm. But now that I see those eyes, who can blame her, said Hank. They ate in the dining room. Mark thought he looked like a pig finishing his second helping of cookies. A woman likes it when her man appreciates her cooking, Hank said. Her man, Mark wondered as Hank and Holly cleared the table. Mark, what are you drinking coffee? Holly asked. Yes, just decaf, Hank shouted from the depths of the narrow kitchen. 2 spoons of cream, 1 of sugar, said Mark. Hank made butterscotch cheesecake. Oh my God, I'm getting fat. It's all her fault, Holly gushed, carrying a tray with 3 mugs of coffee. Olive, is that you? Mark asked, reading the inscription on the ceramic coffee mug. About this is so unexpected, but I love you too, Holly teased. Eh? Oh, Mark asked, then smiled widely. Olivia, I love you, sweetheart. A moment later, Hank entered the dining room with 3 plates of cheesecakes on a tray. Mark, see how I'm attaching a gun to her head, Hank smiled. See how I make her eat it. Like I could say no, Holly complained. Oh my God, this is so good, Mark raved. There was a hint of tartness. Mark was willing to bet that Hank added sour cream to the creamy filling. But the rich toffee offsets the tart, creamy sweetness. Without that sour cream, it would be too rich, Mark said out loud. That's right, Hank agreed. Well, we had plans for this evening, Hank said, taking Mark's empty plate and mug. So, we're kicking you out, Holly admitted, picking up her plate and mug. But I'm really glad you came, Hank said, standing in the doorway of the dining room. She's waiting for a goodnight kiss, Holly whispered loudly to Mark. Hey, Holly, maybe he doesn't want to kiss me, Hank suggested, blushing deeply. Mark smiled and rose to his feet. He had lived with his older brother's ridicule, posturing, and bullying for years, and he knew full well that physical wounds healed much faster than emotional ones. Even if he wasn't attracted to a beautiful, sexy young woman, Mark would do everything he could to avoid hurting her feelings. But he was actually very attracted to his roommate, Holly. He was almost as attracted to the beautiful Hank as he was to the gorgeous Holly. I was trying to think of a way I could get a kiss from you, Mark said to Hank. You know, a kiss and not look like a jerk in front of Holly. He kissed Hank. Good night. Thank you very much for the invitation. Good night, Hank whispered, then turned and ran up the stairs. Mark watched Hank run up the stairs. The yoga pants were sheer. I knew you'd like her, Holly said enthusiastically, joining Mark. I'm so glad you came, Holly whispered at the door. Me too, Mark agreed. Holly kissed him. She smiled. Good night, and gently pushed Mark out of the apartment. At work on Tuesday morning, the usual crowd in the break room watched as Holly enthusiastically greeted Mark. The same group was confused when Mark and Holly sat down to lunch together. Mark found it amusing to have colleague after colleague pop into his office all day and then nod in approval. By Thursday, several people had dared to ask Mark about his relationship. Mark was an open-minded person, which allowed him to stand out from a large field of qualified candidates for the position of marketing manager. Martin Boyd himself was the last person to interview him, and he liked Mark's honest answers. Mark wasn't afraid to admit that he didn't know everything about everything, and there was always something new to learn. So when asked about relationships, Mark said he didn't know what kind of relationship it was. But whatever it was, he was very much enjoying the developing friendship between himself and Holly Tannenbaum. So, we managed to melt the Ice Queen, huh? Brandon Walker, who had recently moved from Great Oak, Texas, drawled as he stood in the doorway of Mark's office. You know, I really don't like you talking about my friend like that, Mark snapped. Holly Tannenbaum, this is a warm and sincere friend. Just because you're too stupid to see it, it's your problem, not hers, and not mine. So, get out. You don't get paid to stand in my office. You're the sweetest man, Holly exclaimed when they met for a 4-hour coffee break. Everyone in the A group is so jealous of me, Holly giggled warmly to Mark. No, they all envy me, Mark smiled. On Thursday morning, Brandon Walker frowned when Holly invited Mark to dinner. Mark smiled. He saw 3 administrative assistants looking at him and Holly with stars in their eyes, as well as 4 men looking at them with envious smiles on their faces. Hank is making lasagna, Holly gushed. You thought red beans and rice were good? Just wait. Just wait. Yeah, and tell Hank I'll take some wine, Mark agreed. She'll make me fat, Holly insisted as she opened the apartment door. Yes, I have this power, Holly. No, it's not you who takes a fork and sticks it in your face. It's all me, Hank shouted from the kitchen. She makes blueberry pies for dessert. Tell me, can anyone resist homemade blueberry pies? With vanilla frosting, Holly asked. Oh, you are such a victim. Let's all feel sorry for Holly. Hi, love. Hank smiled as Mark walked into the kitchen with a large bottle of red wine in his hands. Hey, Mark smiled, then leaned over and kissed Hank. God, this smells incredible. She makes her own pasta. Do you believe this? Holly said, gently stroking Hank's back. Do you believe in that? Who makes their own pasta? The store-bought ones are so tasteless, Hank said, looking for a corkscrew. Baby, do we have a corkscrew? I have an army knife, Mark said, pulling out his Swiss army knife. This time, knowing that there was dessert, Mark did not fill himself up. He would like to. Hank used fresh garlic and olive oil when preparing the pasta sheets. A woman loves when her man appreciates her culinary talents, Hank smiled, kissing Mark as she stood up from the table. I knew you'd like her, Holly exclaimed enthusiastically, squeezing Mark's hand. The fresh blueberry pies were restaurant quality in Mark's opinion. Hank's lasagna was also restaurant quality. Her lasagna put his mother's lasagna in the shade, although Mark always believed that his mother made the best lasagna in the world. "Okay, it's a weeknight," Hank stated as Mark finished his pies. "So we're sending you home. But you need to come up with something for the three of us. And no, not a movie," Holly said. "Something where we can get to know each other better." "So, good night," Hank said, standing in the doorway of the dining room. "She's waiting for a kiss goodbye," Holly whispered loudly. "Shut up, Holly," Hank laughed, clicking her heels nervously. Mark kissed Hank. "Good night," Hank said, and then jumped up the steps. "I think she likes you," Holly chuckled cheerfully as she walked Mark to the door. "And I know that I like you," she whispered and kissed him. Holly gently pushed Mark out of the apartment. Three of them fit in his pickup truck, and he drove them to the Hop Kim Chinese restaurant. The trio had fun eating with chopsticks and trying each other's dishes. They then went to the Courtyard bowling alley near the Courtyard Mall in Pin Oak, Louisiana. Holly hadn't bowled since she was a teenager, and Hank had never picked up a pin. Bowling was a great sport for three people to get to know each other. This fostered friendly competition and genuine applause and support. They played in alphabetical order. First Hank, then Holly, with Mark in last place. "My mother was a beautiful blonde who loved my father, me and my sisters with all her heart," Holly said, then applauded Hank's lucky shot. "She never said, and my dad never said, but the reason they got divorced was because my mom loved women," Holly said, then walked up to the bowling alley. "This is fun," Hank giggled happily. "Yes, bowling is a place where no one orders you to be quiet," Mark opined. "Ha, beat it," Holly grinned as she managed to knock down 5 pins. Mark smiled and picked up his bowling ball. Since the sports complex was only a few months old, the paths were still quite slippery. The shoes were quite hard, and the balls were not chipped and worn. Mark wondered how long it would be before the place became as run down as the bowl Arama in Bender, Louisiana. Carefully, Mark managed to knock down 1 pin. His second throw was a ball flying along the edge of the lane. "Ha!" Hank teased him as she walked by. Hank squealed and then laughed. Holly smiled as he sat down next to her. "I saw your office," Holly reminded him. "HM, this is cute." "Hey, I've never seen your office," Mark said. "And I saw all those bowling trophies on your shelf," Holly giggled and kissed him. Holly told Mark about how one morning she lost her beautiful, wonderful, loving mother in a terrible car accident. Holly had just recently begun the frightening and uncomfortable transformation from awkward girl to young woman. Holly really needed her mom. "I mean, Daddy married Miss Wendy. There was never any doubt that she loved us girls," Holly said. "Next time, Hank, you'll do better, love." "You can do better," Mark agreed. While Holly tried to visualize the perfect throw, Hank distracted Mark. Mark somehow managed to get up and play, knocking down 5 pins. High school, college, and then finding out Dad had cancer, Holly said, "I really needed my mom." Holly told Mark about Roger's battle with cancer, but ultimately lost her battle. And in the midst of all this chaos, she met Matty Goldman. "He made me laugh. He always seemed to know what to say," Holly muttered. Valerie, Holly's mother, made sure that Holly, Alexandra, and Kendra never wanted for anything. Valerie was very rich, thanks in part to her father's estates. Smart investments and smart estate planning have increased Valerie's wealth. Miss Wendy inherited half of Roger's fortune. After all, she was his wife. But the remainder was divided into 3 parts between Holly, Alex, and Kendra. As the oldest, Holly received first choice from her father's classic car collection. "I was with him when he bought that Mustang," Holly whispered. "I told him it's my car." "And now it's your car," Mark said. "See this, eh? Do you see this?" Hank screamed. "I got 7. "See? You're getting better at this, Mark praised as a happy Hank sat down next to him. Did she talk about me? Asked Hank. Holly's squeal alerted them that she had accidentally gotten a spare. Hank hugged the girl. It's called a strike, right? Holly was delighted. Right? Did I get a strike? Actually, this is a spare. Mark smiled and managed to knock down 3 pins. Holly told Mark that immediately after her father died, Maddie announced that he was moving back to DeGard, his hometown. Holly felt real panic. She had just buried her father, she had no mother, and now her boyfriend, her support system, was gone too. In desperation, Holly proposed they get married. Luckily, Matt agreed. However, Holly was not completely ignorant and insisted on a prenuptial agreement. Damn, we're going to be together forever. Fit whatever you want into it, Maddie smiled. Forrest Maynard, one of Roger's associates, helped Holly and Maddie draw up an agreement. Seeing Maddie's eyes constantly shifting to Cindy, the firm's beautiful and highly educated secretary, Holly made a last-minute addition regarding the adultery. Once again, Maddie stated that they would be together forever, so he signed the contract without hesitation. Maddie rented an apartment at the charming, upscale Camelot Apartments in Bender, Louisiana. 2 months later, on a beautiful Saturday in May, Holly became Mrs. Goldman. The couple honeymooned at Marina del Grande Aqua, a small, quiet villa on the west coast of Mexico. Holly didn't even think to ask how they could afford such an extravagant honeymoon. Until Holly's wedding night, they had never made love. However, after the wedding, Holly discovered that she liked sex. She loved sex. She craved sex. Are you going to play? Hank teased Mark as he sat with his golden brown eyes wide open. Give me a minute, Mark groaned. Mark smiled, then laughed as he heard excited squeals and giggles behind him. Hank and Holly. Returning home to a beautiful and spacious apartment, furnished with exquisite, expensive furniture that Maddie had chosen, Holly discovered that they were almost 3 months behind on rent, and O'Neill threatened to take away their furniture. They just received notice from St. Elizabeth Utilities. Then the bill for their honeymoon arrived. And of course Maddie didn't have a job, Holly muttered. Oh, he was looking. Well, he said he was looking. What about him and his buddies Woody and Ricky? They met at night. They had a business that was going to make millions. The 3 men met at Holly's apartment in Camelot. Maddie rented an apartment in her name, snacked and drank every drop of alcohol he could get his hands on, while strategizing how to penetrate the market, discussing securities, and discussing labor-intensive organizations. Holly first tried to reason with Maddie. They had no product, no service, no viable commodity. After being told to mind her own business several times, Holly was confronted by Woody, Ricky, and Maddie. Armed with receipts for the massive amounts of food and alcohol they had consumed in the last 2 weeks alone, Holly asked when she could hope to recoup her investment in RWM Strategical Management, Limited. Oh, I see. So never, Holly said after Ricky's rambling and nonsensical explanation of their mission statement. So, next RWM meeting, it should be at your house, Ricky. That's when Holly learned that Ricky's wife wouldn't let Ricky drink. Woody still lived at home with his parents, and his parents believed that Woody was clean and sober and attended and na meetings on the nights he was actually at Maddie's apartment. Their first fight as husband and wife occurred when Holly blocked her loan. The second argument occurred when Holly refused to allow Woody and Ricky into her apartment. We are on the threshold. Months of planning are about to bear fruit, Maddie said seriously. Then meet at the library, meet at Jitters, meet in the dumpster behind Casa Ol, Holly barked. But you and your buddies don't meet here and eat my food and drink my booze. Oh, okay, Matt, Ricky chuckled. I think we know who wears the pants and who wears the panties in this marriage. When the apartment manager told Holly that the 6-month lease was almost up, Holly decided she wouldn't renew. Maddie whined, begged, threatened, and sulked. Holly told him he could renew the lease at any time. In his name, not hers. Maddie stated that there was some kind of misunderstanding. He was constantly mistaken for another Matthew Goldman, so his credit rating was in the toilet. Holly was adamant. Maddie objected to moving from a prestigious, upscale apartment to one wide trailer in Kimball, Louisiana. Holly simply told him she was moving, and since the furniture was in her name, she moved with it. Maddie's mother and father were still alive, still living nearby in Bender, Louisiana. Maddie could live with them if living in a trailer was so disgusting to his sensibilities. "I love Daisy Upchurch," Holly giggled. "The women in the trailer park called her DK, and I was like, what are you all talking about? Her name is Daisy Upchurch. Shouldn't you call her Yes?" The women at the trailer park called a rather attractive woman in her 40s DK, which means door handle. According to one woman, every boy in the trailer park took part, except for her precious boy, of course. 2 days after her 21st birthday, a birthday Maddie had forgotten about, Holly returned home from work at Boyd Investments to find her husband cheating with Daisy Upchurch. Maddie's triumphant grin turned to a frown when Holly wasn't upset. His scowl turned to apprehension when Holly reminded him of the prenuptial agreement they had signed. Is that us? It was in Texas," Maddie said. This is Louisiana. Louisiana is under the Napoleonic Code, so a prenuptial agreement is not valid in that state." Penny Jones from Richards Film and Jones burst out laughing when Holly told her about Maddie's claims. After reviewing the document, Penny and Holly drafted a petition to dissolve the marriage between Matthew Goldman and Holly Tannenbaum. A lawyer, Maddie, Parker Johnson, was furious when he learned that Holly received an inheritance from both her mother and father before the union. The 50% Maddie could hope to earn was 50% of the bills he managed to pay. As far as Daisy Upchurch was concerned, the afternoon date was nothing more than a stress reliever. But it wasn't love. And Matthew wasn't allowed to move into her trailer. She had to think about her little daughter. Maddie returned home to his parents. This move ends any hopes that RWM Strategic Management, Limited, will someday become a viable corporation. The Goldmans fiercely despised Ricky and banned the arrogant young man from their home. "Okay, tough guy," Vernon Goldman told his son after Maddie's second month under their roof. "At your place, you have 2 weeks. 14 days right now to find a job, a stable, paying job. Not some pipe dream sold to you by that damn user Ricky Hebert. Real work." "I'm looking," Maddie lied as he munched on a large bowl of frosted flakes. "Well, stop waiting and start looking. 14 days or you'll have to find another place to live," Vernon said. Would you put your son out?" Maddie gasped in shock. "What? We give birth to you, feed you, send you to school. You're finally getting married," Shirley Goldman said, standing behind Vernon. "Hey, our job, ready." Holly was unmoved when Maddie told her that he had managed to find a paying job at a professional dry cleaner. Although his chronic unemployment caused him trouble, the reason for his divorce was his infidelity, not his lack of ambition. "Your turn," Hank told Holly after 2 throws. Holly was delighted when she managed to knock down 3 pins on the first throw and 3 more pins on the second throw. Mark, Hank, and quite a few men enjoyed Holly's little happy dance. Mark smiled sympathetically, and then Hank applauded, which succeeded in knocking down 7 pins. But after the Watsons left, the Michaels moved in. Holly continued her story. "Hank, how many of you were there?" "Me, my mom, 3 sisters, and don't do anything wrong, Danny," Hank shrugged. "Don't do anything wrong, Danny?" Mark asked, grinning as he thought of his older brother Erwin, the little angel in their mother's eyes. Erwin knew this and probably took advantage of their mother's beliefs. Hank responded to Mark's smirk as she leaned against him. Holly saw a new family move in. A couple of days later, when it was time for them to settle in, she came next door and introduced herself. Her chocolate cake certainly tasted good, and Janice Michaels, the brood's mother, laughed knowingly when Holly admitted it was straight from Burns and Burns Grocers. "I mean, I know where the kitchen is," Holly said. But cooking is not my forte. Well, sweetie, who looks like yours? Janice said. I'm almost sure that most men are ready to ignore it. One Friday, after a long week of work, Holly came home and saw Henrietta, the eldest daughter Michael, sitting outside and listlessly drooping feet off the edge of the small veranda in front of his trailer. The 18-year-old girl returned the friendly gesture to Holly. On a whim, Holly walked over and asked Henrietta what was going on. Nothing, Henrietta admitted. Is it true? I mean, shouldn't you be at Kimball Academy? You're going to Kimball, right? Isn't Kimball having her spring dance tonight? Holly asked. Uh-huh, Henrietta admitted gloomily. So why aren't you dressed and ready to go? Holly asked. Miss Holly? Am I fat? Henrietta pointed out, pointing at her plump body. Yeah, you weigh a couple pounds more than most people would consider acceptable, Holly shrugged. But this face, and oh my God, those beautiful eyes. So, when do you plan to get ready? Miss Holly, no one asked me, Henrietta admitted sadly. Well, their loss is my gain, Holly smiled, helping Henrietta to her feet. Holly told Janice that she and Henrietta were going to spend the night. Scary movies, frozen pizza, ice cream, staying up late. Janice said Henrietta could stay at her house. So, what's your favorite pizza? Please don't say mushrooms. Mushrooms are so disgusting. Maddie loved mushrooms, but I can't stand them, Holly said as she and Henrietta drove to Burns and Burns Grocers. He always said, take them off, but you can still taste them. They took with them a frozen pizza and a large jar of Burns and Burns brand orange sorbet, Henrietta's absolute favorite. Holly smiled sympathetically when Henrietta revealed that she never got to eat it because Burns and Burns was Danny's favorite food. Miss Holly, what do you like? Henrietta asked as they pushed the stroller through the grocery store. Whatever, Holly shrugged, not wanting to admit that Rocky Road was her favorite. And Henrietta, please stop calling me Miss Holly God. Do you know how old I feel? She picked up several packages of Burns and Burns Supreme Cinnamon Rolls. Holly didn't joke with Janice about her lackluster cooking skills. In the beer and spirits department, Holly picked up an Artigas tequila. Henrietta quietly asked if they could get a six-pack of beer. Gratchly, and Holly put him in the buggy too. Now, first things first, Holly said when they returned with the trailer. We need to put on our pajamas. Let's start the sleepover. In the bedroom, Holly chose a cute blouse and matching panties. Without hesitation, she took off her day clothes and put on her pajamas. With three sisters and a mother, Henrietta didn't hesitate to take off her shorts, t-shirt, and faded bra. She put on her No. 5 Garrett Hartley New Orleans Saints jersey and raced along with Holly as they ran into the living room. Have you ever seen The Ring? Holly asked, pressing the buttons on the TV remote control. Isn't this Cartoon Network or football? Said Henrietta. Holly made them pineapple juice, orange juice, and a tequila drink. The beer still wasn't cold enough. Then, huddled together under a woolen blanket, they began to watch a horror movie. 40 minutes later, Holly began preparing one of the pizzas. On the stage at the well, Holly and Henrietta screamed and grabbed each other. The final TV scene caused more screams, and they clung to each other. Holly turned on Ring Hash 2, and they drank ice-cold beer. As Henrietta put down the empty beer can, Holly put down 2 large bowls of orange sherbet. Shivering from the cold, they huddled together under a fleece blanket in the dark living room. And at the end of the second horror film, Henrietta kissed Holly. All my life, I knew I was my mother's daughter, Holly told Mark. Do you like women? Mark concluded as he looked into Holly's brown eyes. Both women and men, Holly admitted, then rose to her feet. When Miss Holly came up to introduce herself, Hank continued the story. I wanted to hate her. How can you be so beautiful and not be a bitch? In the weeks that she lived next door to the beautiful Holly Tannenbaum, Henrietta noticed that Holly's smiles and greetings never changed. Henrietta never noticed that hidden trace of hostility that she always noticed emanating from the queen bees and their docile drones. Holly seemed like a truly warm woman. When I was 5, I was going to go to kindergarten, a big girl school, Holly told Henrietta, her brown eyes warming with the memories. My mom sat me down and told me she was so proud of me, her big girl, and she just knew that I would be the most beautiful little girl and the smartest. Valerie impressed Holly, smart or not, beautiful or not. Making fun of others was never acceptable. Some kids would be fat, but it was wrong to laugh at them. Some children may not know their abs, but instead of laughing at them, Holly should try to help them. I miss my mom, Holly admitted to Henrietta as they sat on the steps outside the Michaels trailer. She sounds like an amazing woman, Henrietta agreed. Watching terrifying films was exciting, frightening, and confusing for Henrietta. Her friends were crazy about Clay Craggle, Kincaid Bridges Roberts, and some other popular boys. They were all jockeying for positions on Ashley St. Martin's periphery. Henrietta didn't understand the appeal of any of the flighty, pretentious, and selfish people in the upper clique of Kimball Academy. When you remove the outer shell from them, you will be left with nothing, Henrietta thought, looking at her ruling friends. But as she sat next to Holly Tannenbaum, Henrietta thought she might finally understand how her friends felt when they missed one boy or another. The fact that Holly was not a boy confused and frightened Henrietta. Unable to bear the conflicting thoughts and emotions any longer, Henrietta acted on her feelings. She kissed Holly, and Holly kissed back. They made love. But after we made love for the first time, Holly cooed into Mark's other ear. I started calling her Hank. She's just not Henrietta, is she? Mark stammered. Your turn to play, Holly giggled slightly at him. Mark threw 2 balls. The first release into the gutter was unintentional. The second ball into the gutter was deliberate. He then sat down as a giggling Hank rose to her feet. What did she tell you? Holly asked. 9. I have 9 of them, Hank screamed. I think this is our last time, Holly said, rising to her feet. Finish, Mark said, hugging Hank as she hugged him happily. I have 9, Hank sang as Mark laughed. Did you have fun? The older woman asked as Mark returned their shoes to the counter. Yes, ma'am, we certainly are, Mark agreed. That chef, Milt Duhan. He'll be at Bricks and Jazz Beach tomorrow, Hank said, suddenly nervous when Mark started the truck. Oh, yes, Mark asked. Yeah, he's going to bake an apple pie, Hank said. For every pie he sells, money goes to the St. Elizabeth Animal Shelter. Would you like to come in for coffee? Hank blurted out. Me, Hank, you, are you sure? Holly asked out of breath. Holly was very happy. I knew you'd like it, Holly said happily. Hooray, Holly is right. Yet again, let's all cheer for Holly, irritated Hank and then giggled. Mark wasn't surprised that no one went into the kitchen to make coffee. Instead, Holly went behind the bar and poured 3 small glasses of brandy. Looking at the label, Mark nodded in approval. Sire apple brandy was a great, inexpensive after-dinner liqueur. Later, the 3 of them made love. Mark showered, shaved, even thought about taking a nap, but decided to drink a few cups of coffee instead. Holly and Hank were clearly dressed, ready, and waiting for him outside. Television cameras were installed inside the Bricks Pizzeria. Apparently, they taped the function. Mark wasn't surprised when Milt Duhan, a local celebrity chef on Channel 12's Cast Iron Stomach, tapped Holly to help him sift the dry ingredients. The pies are $25 each, Chelsea Duhan, a local reporter, and wife Milt told the camera. $50 each if they also want a cast iron skillet. I'd like 2 of them, with the frying pans, Mark said as the waitress came to take his order. Yes, sir, and thank you, beamed the waitress. Every sale goes to support the St. Elizabeth Animal Shelter. Mother, do you see? I told you it was him." The redhead squealed, bursting into the crowded restaurant, dragging a much older woman with her. "Miles, they're taping," Llewellyn Stamey chided Amelia Stamey. "Hello, I watch your show all the time. I record it while I'm at school, but as soon as I get home it's on," Mealy Stamey muttered excitedly as Milt stopped what he was doing and glared at the intruder. "Miss, please sit down," asked Bill Henderson, the stage manager. "I just love you so much," Millie laughed as her mother and Bill escorted the girl to her seat. "Now we have the filling, and I need a volunteer," Milt said as Bill gave him the ghost signal. Millie was up from her seat and around the counter before Milt could finish his sentence, declaring, "Me, I will do it, I will do it." "To wash all those dishes, then sweep and mop the floors. Oh, and we have a volunteer." "Yes," Milt said, smiling at Millie as the crowd laughed. "I'm serious. Ask your mom. I'm watching you all the time," Millie muttered, laying out the apple filling into the pan. "It's all because of you that I will become a cook. I'm going to go to Algy's Culinary College. You should teach a class or two there, I swear." "Hey, Mommy, does she ever catch her breath?" Milt asked Llewellyn. "If she does it when I'm not looking," the older woman smiled tightly. Mark, Hank, and Holly sat and watched as the sweet, bubbly 18-year-old redhead girl fawned over and admired the older Milt Duhon. Chelsea conducted a short interview with each person who purchased the pie. After learning that Mark bought each of them a pie and a frying pan, Mark received 2 kisses on camera. When she left, on the pretext of needing to go to the toilet, Holly bought a 3rd pie and a frying pan and told the waitress to give them to that lovely redhead and her mother. Holly warned the waitress not to tell her mother and daughter, "Stay where the pie came from." On Monday morning, Mark staggered down the stairs, lethargic and slightly irritated. He had to drive towards Kimball, quickly shower and shave, get dressed and drive back to Bender. He was 28 minutes late. Fortunately, he was the manager of his department. During their coffee break, Holly laughed her happy musical laugh, teasing Mark for being late. She then reminded him that it was Monday, and Monday meant red beans and rice in the Tannenbaum household. On Tuesday morning, Mark again had to rush to his apartment, rush to work. On Tuesday evening, he plucked up courage and packed his suit, shirt, and toiletries. On Thursday morning, Martin himself called Mark into his office. After some hesitation and silence, Martin finally found the time to say that someone had filed a complaint that Mark had used his status, his position as a manager, to coerce a subordinate into sexual relations. "Tell Brandon Walker that Holly Tannenbaum is an assistant manager and works in a separate department of Boyd Investment Group," Mark smiled. "I have no authority over her or her department. There is no coercion in our relationship." "Had to keep an eye on that," Martin said, still looking awkward. "Oh, I understand. And yes, I would encourage you to contact his Tannenbaum," Mark said. "Why don't you just move?" Hank asked Thursday night when Mark brought his casual work suit for Casual Friday. "Oh, where are we going tomorrow night?" "Bowling again?" Holly asked. On Tuesday, just before he left for lunch, Holly burst into Mark's office. She playfully pushed his rocking chair away and quickly typed on the keyboard. "You have to see this," Holly enthused as the Channel 12 video began streaming. "And I'm here with Mealy Stamey, and we're going to make a quick chicken caxiator," Milt Duhon announced as a beaming Mealy Stamey stood next to him. Mark and Holly ate lunch at Mark's table while watching the broadcast of the show. Holly sent the link to Hank's cell phone. She was sure Hank would need the chicken caxiata recipe. "Seriously, why don't you just move?" Hank asked as she made Italian omelets on Saturday morning. "Think about it," Holly whispered. "2 beautiful women. They feed you. They take care of you," agreed Hank, placing a plate in front of her. After the 4th weekend, Mark agreed to give 30 days' notice to end the lease on his apartment. He packed his clothes and put a few souvenirs in a separate box. At the moment, he didn't know what to do with the furniture. You know, I bet Charmaine would love this table, Mark thought. Charmaine Hebert, Mark's cousin through his mother's unmarried younger sister, was only too happy to come and pick up a table and 6 dining chairs, as well as a living room set of a couch, an armchair, a coffee table, and 2 brass lamps. What about a bedroom set? Mark asked the beautiful, plump 18-year-old girl as her 2 male friends helped her. The bed isn't big enough, Charmaine smiled. Yes, one of the awkward young men smiled. Oh, Mark said, and then gasped at the looks that Charmaine and the 2 young men exchanged. If you weren't my relative, I'd tell you there's room in our bed, Charmaine admitted. But we're related, Mark hastily reminded the beautiful brunette. I'll ask if Alondra needs this bed. Alondra Anders was Mark's 19-year-old niece. Gertrude Trudy Trehan married Jonathan Anders on Saturday following graduation from St. Thomas Aquinas School. They liked to joke that Alondra Michelle Anders was born 5 months premature. She was born in November. Currently, a 19-year-old girl, her boyfriend, and 2 or 3 other couples rented a double-wide trailer. Mark was almost sure that the beautiful but flighty girl would be able to use this furniture. He was sure that they would also need his serviceable utensils, durable plates, bowls, and cups. Mark moved in with Holly and Hank. Finally, Mark received information from 2 girls. Hank was pregnant. This was what both women hoped for. That's why Holly was so happy when Hank invited Mark over to the apartment after their bowling date. I'm going to be a mommy, Hank was now sobbing, overcome with joy. What do you think about it, Daddy? Holly asked. 2 Tuesdays after Hank's happy discovery and announcement of her pregnancy, Mark looked up when Holly knocked lightly on his doorframe. Mark smiled, but then lost his smile when Holly silently pointed towards his office door. You can close this, Mark agreed. You know, I've been feeling a little out of sorts the last couple of days, Holly said, sitting down in front of his desk. Yes, Mark began to say. Anyway, I just got back from Dr. Turner, Holly said in a quiet, even voice. Is everything okay? Mark asked, the color draining from his face. No, it's not like that, Holly exclaimed, bursting into tears. Oh my God, is it cancer? Mark could barely bring himself to ask as he knelt down next to her chair and wrapped his arms around her. I'm pregnant, Holly sobbed. What are you doing? Mark asked. I am pregnant. It's been about 2 months, Holly cried. He smiled. This is wonderful, Mark said happily. God, Hank will kill me, Holly screamed. How could this happen? Well, you see, Daddy and Mommy. Mark joked delightedly. I know how it happened, Holly screamed. It shouldn't have. It should have only happened with Hank. But this is fantastic. It is fantastic. Holly Tannenbaum, will you marry me? Mark laughed happily. Wait, what? Holly asked. Will you marry me? Mark repeated. What? Mark, I can't, Holly muttered. I know we can't have a church wedding. We're both divorced and... Mark babbled. Mark, I can't marry you. I'm already married, Holly said. No, that's not true. You said that you and Maddie are divorced, Mark objected. Maddie? Yeah, we're divorced. But Mark, Hank and I, we're married, Holly muttered. Mark sat down heavily on the floor. Holly's lips continued to move. She was still talking, but Mark couldn't hear a word she said. Slowly, Mark rose to his feet. He numbly opened the door to his office, then walked around it and sat down at the table. Mrs. Tannenbaum, I will please leave my office, Mark ordered, turning to look at the monitor. Mark felt himself shrinking inside. His insides were just jelly stuffed with skin. Becky, his wife, used him. He was just a means to an end. She wanted the prestige of marriage. She wanted an expensive, shiny ring and the title of mistress. She wanted a luxury car, fashionable clothes from famous brands, and an upscale apartment. And Mark was just a fool for giving her these things. After she forced and manipulated him into giving her these things, Becky decided she wanted to try other things. And, apparently, Hank and Holly only wanted to he help them get pregnant. Both women only wanted a child. And now that they were both pregnant, Mark was no longer needed. It was disposable. 10 minutes later, Mark sent an email to Martin Boyd. He then left the Boyd building. Mark walked into Red's sports bar, sat down at a table, and caught the waitress's attention. Beer and a plate of wings. Hot, 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 hot as possible, Mark said, ignoring her. The apartment was empty. He still had 2 days of rent left. Mark was pretty sure the landlord had rented the apartment the moment they completed the inspection. Perhaps his mother would allow him to spend a few nights at her house until he found somewhere else to live. "Will you buy the girl a drink?" Holly asked as the waitress turned and walked away from his table. "How did you find me?" Mark asked gloomily. "Followed you," Holly admitted. "I'm surprised you didn't see me right behind you. There aren't a lot of classic Mustangs out there." Mark didn't say anything. Holly waved to the waitress and ordered unsweetened iced tea. As the woman set the drink down, Holly looked into Mark's empty eyes. "I know. Well, I guess," Holly said. "You know what happens when you guess?" Mark tried to smile. "I know what you're thinking," Holly continued. You think that Hank and I, we were just using you." "Well, isn't it?" Mark asked bitterly. "Isn't that exactly what happened?" The wings arrived and Holly reached out to grab one. Mark's hand reached out and stopped her. "Honey, look at them. They're still hot. You can't eat this," Mark warned. "See," Holly smiled. "Even though you think I used you, what did you just do?" "I give up." "What have I done?" Mark asked. "You called me honey. Even though you're mad at me, you called me, and just stopped me from burning the roof of my mouth," Holly said, grabbing a stick of celery from her plate. "Mark, Hank and I, were considering the possibility of Black Blade. We were talking to doctors," Holly said. "Then one day I went with have dinner with you. The whole time we were sitting there, you never called your ex-wife. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, but—" "Becky," Mark said, chewing on a carrot stick. "See, even now, you could call her a nasty name, but you didn't. I went home and told Hank I just found the daddy we need for our baby," Holly said and reached for the wing again. "Hooray," Mark muttered. "I told her I found a man, a real man, and our child, our child will have a dad, a man who will stay by his side and teach her to ride a bike, teach her to roller skate." "Skating," Holly said, dipping a wing in blue cheese sauce. "Well, Daddy needs to learn how to roller skate first if I'm going to teach her," Mark smiled tightly. "And please tell me he or she won't play football. Oh God, kill me. I have to watch my niece Alondra just run around. How can a bunch of kids run around so much and never score a damn point?" "Mark, we didn't use you. We chose you," Holly said and whistled from the sharp heat of the wing. "It's oh God, Hank should try it." "Miss, waitress." "Yes, ma'am," the young woman asked. "I need an order like this to go," Holly said, pointing to the wings. "Separate checks?" the waitress asked Mark. No, put it on my bill," Mark said. "Mark, we were ready to go the clinic route, but then I met the most wonderful person in the world. I was hoping that Hank would accept you and that the Jewish girl would say a Hail Mary." "Well, damn, you know it's serious," Holly said. Holly ate most of the wings. Mark had to move the second-order foam container with wings away from her. Otherwise, Hank would not have received wings. He ordered a plate of assorted slices and potato skins with bacon. Again, Holly ate most of the food, but Mark was quite full. Please, please come home. This is home. This is our home. You, me, and Hank, Holly pleaded. If you're not there, this is not a home. It's just a place. Mark shrugged slowly, admitting defeat. Holly squealed happily and kissed him. She waited until Mark paid the bill, and then they left the bar together. I'll take, Holly said, reaching for the takeout box. No, Mark smiled. I'll make sure Hank gets it. Oh, but she's not going to eat them all, Holly coaxed. What she won't eat, I will eat, Mark said, pressing his truck's door lock fob. Hey, Mark, Holly asked, standing next to her Mustang. Yeah, Mark asked, looking over the back of his truck. We love you, Holly promised. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.